Welcome back to How to Be a Better DM, the official podcast of Monsters.rent. I'm Justin Lewis.
And I'm Tanner Weyland.
And we are here to help you tell better stories for yourself and your players as you dungeon master sessions of D&D, Dungeons & Dragons. We'd like to give you some quick announcements. We actually have one before the show, and then after the show, if you want to stick around, we have some more announcements then as well. But first, let's talk about this. Tired of being alone? Are you tired of not having any of your players understand you? Are you tired of never truly belonging? Well, you're in luck. All you need to do is join the Guild. The Guild is a unique and exclusive experience that is only open to Dungeon Masters. It is a full community focused on helping ease your DMing burdens. Want to meet other DMs? Join the Guild. Want to discuss your homebrew ideas with people who would appreciate it instead of just telling your cat? Join the Guild. Want to find a place where all your wildest dreams will come true? Join the Guild. Go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free. Wait, that can't be right. Chuck, can you check this again? Is this supposed to be... What? Oh, they're serious? It's free? Oh, okay. All right. Yes, go to monsters.rent/guild and sign up today for free, even though they are crazy for giving this away for free. Common side effects may include burping, sneezing, laughing, breathing, hearing, listening, tasting, farting, critting, sarcasm, and in extreme cases, explosive diarrhea. Awesome. With that out of the way, we can get into today's show. Today's show is going to be with me and Tanner. We're going to be talking about a particular topic. Basically, as hobbies go, this one requires a lot of dedication and stick-to-it-I've-ness. Sometimes you just don't feel like prepping or running a session, and sometimes you just aren't excited to be a DM. So in that regard, Tanner and I today are going to talk about how to stay excited and avoid Dungeon Master burnout. Before we get into that, any thoughts, Tanner? How are you doing?
Oh, thank you for asking, Justin. Doing well. It's been a busy week. So my dad, kind of as a birthday present to my wife, we moved into a new house, and we had this idea. We were like, oh, let's do an accent wall. That'll be fun, in our master bedroom. And so luckily, my mom volunteered my dad's time, and we'd pay for the materials. And he's been helping so much, but like, boy, howdy, does it take a while? Like I've been helping as much as I can, but it's kind of, it reminds me of when I was a kid, how my dad asked for our help all the time, but half the time I was just standing there holding something for him, Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like that sometimes. It's like, oh, when I'm sanding, and there's like a lot of stuff to do, we could help, but when he's caulking, around it, I can't do anything. So that's been this week's adventure. Just every evening, feeling like a man. Just kidding. Do-it-yourself stuff is not just for men. It's for everybody who wants to have a bad time. But it's been kind of interesting. Otherwise, just doing good. Gonna watch the Super Bowl for the first time in years because my wife loves Rihanna. So that should be interesting too.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love not painting walls in a house. Like that's one of my favorite things to do is to not paint walls in a house.
Favorite hobby? Not painting walls.
Exactly. I freaking hate it. But yeah, speaking of hating it, obviously we want to avoid hating Dungeons and Dragons. So obviously the first question I think we should ask is, what do you think causes a particular DM to lose excitement about being a dungeon master? And obviously, this isn't talking about those people who were foisted into being a dungeon master. This is for the people who heard about it, were super excited to try it, loved it, and then slowly just the flame went away.
Yeah, honestly, I think that it comes down to a few factors, right? And I think it's the same, not the same, but similar factors to what makes you feel burned out or unexcited about any other part of your life, like your work or anything, right? Where it's like, monotony mixed with strain or overload could be another word for that. Mixed with just not feeling, you know, well, I was gonna say not feeling stretched, but I guess that's why people hate monotony, is because they just hate not experiencing something new, not feeling stretched. And so I think that that's kind of a common issue with DMing, is because it takes a lot out of you. You're planning a lot. Whether you're doing a pre-written adventure or self-written, it just takes a lot of effort from you. And then sometimes you and the players get into a rut where you're doing the same thing. You're in the middle of a big campaign, and it's not like you can just suddenly break off, or at least it doesn't feel like you can suddenly just break off and do something different. And that's going to get to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think a little bit about like relationships and how when in marriage, you get complacent, you do the same things over and over again because it's more efficient, quote unquote, but it tends to make things more lackluster. So in being a DM, how can we, and I'm maybe asking this for myself, how can we like add in new things or try new methods? Like, I guess, is that a question?
That's a question I can work with. Thank you.
Yeah.
How can we add in new things? Honestly, it just comes down to planning, really, and self-awareness.
Hmm.
Because one of the biggest things that happens, and like I said, this happens in other parts of life as well as DMing, is that we just get into the grind, and we're just going day to day, session to session, and you feel like you barely have enough time to plan for the normal stuff, let alone thinking about, hey, am I happy with this? Can I change it? And so taking some time to plan and think about how you want to change it is huge, which is one reason why one of the things I recommend is doing a more major switch up just kind of on the fly.
Hmm.
So like if you're doing a campaign, let's say, and your players kind of hit a natural stopping point and you've been feeling burned out for a sec, that's a great time to do at least a couple different things. One is talk with another player to the side, maybe leading up to this, and be like, hey, we're going to be hitting a stopping point. I would love for you to kind of run a few sessions as a side quest. And it could be as an entirely different setting, different characters, or it could be, a side quest for these players, and then that would give you the time that you need to reevaluate your DMing and be like, okay, where could I spice things up, or, if you're coming to a natural breaking point, you could, let's say that you pre-write your own content, and you're like, oh, I'm tired of writing new content every week. Then when you're coming to natural breakpoint, think, okay, maybe you could just pop in some pre-written stuff that other people have made, right? And there's so much of it out there. So it's like, and that would give you kind of the weight off your chest of having to create everything by yourself,
Yeah. I also wonder if you could do that even aside from a natural breaking point. Like, let's say you're in a dungeon and you're chasing the big bad boss, and it's kind of a slog. The players, you can tell they're kind of getting bored with the dungeon. Well, they come into a room that obviously has this big red button that no player can resist pushing, and boom, they're transported to another, you know, plane where they're doing something completely different. They thought they were going to finish the story, but now they're like, whoa, it kind of changes the because when you get in a routine, your players will also get in a routine, and so when you can kind of shock their system by being like, nope, something completely different, they're going to be like, whoa, wake up, what's going on, you know. But I do think you have to do that a little bit right. Like if you're in the middle of a boss fight and he's about to die, just let him die and then do the switch up. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
don't pull the rug out from under your player's feet.
Yeah, no, but I love your suggestion, because it's like, hey, there's many ways that you can mid-adventure give the players a different feel to their adventure, right? and it doesn't necessarily have to be, after they've beaten like the checkpoint boss for the
Yeah.
adventure, and so I have a question, like, what right now do you regularly do to keep excited about D&D?
Well, I just started keeping better notes of what my players talk about or do during the session. And this is more for like if I come up with an NPC name that is important for one of the players, I write that down. And I also have a habit of, or at least I'm working on this habit, excuse me, of writing every day a little bit. And I have a certain amount that I write. And so when I look at the notes of the previous session and I see this name Hezriel, and I know that, oh, that has to do with my wife's character and part of a new kind of arc that they're going through that they don't even know about. That kind of excites me because it's like, oh, I get to plan this thing for them. So really, I guess what I'm saying is pulling out those interesting points in the sessions that I know are interesting to me because I know that they're going to be interesting to my players, and then planning time to expand on those, even if I'll never get to them, right? That excites me a little bit. I think also thinking of the story in the long term and being like, oh, wow, this thing is going to happen, and I'm kind of excited for it, and I can't wait to get there. That helps me as well. And I have to say, one other thing that I like is feeling okay telling my players, hey, can we skip this week?
Yeah, I totally agree. If you're feeling burned out, one thing that you definitely shouldn't do is just pile on more burnout.
Right.
You should be open with your players about that. I love that.
Yeah. One other thing I did notice as well is that in some sessions, I'm quicker to like, okay, everyone's here, let's get into the game. In other sessions, when I'm just like tired or something, I let the pregame chit chat go on a little bit longer, and that seems to relax me and kind of help me kind of de-stress a little bit before the game, so that way I can take care of the game and actually give a better experience. And I find in those instances I'm a little bit better at improvising and things like that. So I think, outside of D&D, just making sure that you are relaxing yourself on purpose and you are taking time to de-stress, whatever that means for you. I think those are very, very big parts as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the thing that you brought up about, waiting like at the start of the session and kind of letting that friendly vibe continue and kind of help you get the energy. I think that's an important aspect here is that, I think there's two issues that a lot of campaigns have that can lead to a DM just not feeling excited. One is if, your friendly hangout suddenly just became all business, and you're just like, okay, let's get through this session. I have a lot planned. Then it's like, hey, you're kind of, putting the cart before the horse a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and putting, having a good time, which is, I mean, that's why we play D&D, right?
Mm-hmm.
You put that ahead of that. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have a real issue of pacing where the DM and the players just aren't super engaged because the game isn't going at a pace and isn't requiring a lot out of them because they're just going so slow, you know? And like this can happen in battles. I see it so much in battles where it's like, oh, the DM isn't keeping the players' turns short. The players are spending forever thinking about their moves while they're on their turn instead of beforehand. Or, the DM is letting the players discuss their next move, like as in just like like general moves, like way too long. If you can cut down on those or set a timer or any of the kind of tools that help you keep things just snappy and spinning along, then your game's going to have a lot more energy just naturally because
Mm-hmm.
things are going to be coming much faster. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think going back to writing excuses. I love that podcast.
Mm-hmm.
One thing they always say is if things start getting boring, you need to have the bad guys kick down the door, and that leads me to believe. So the topic of the podcast today is how to stay excited about being a dungeon master, and then kind of parentheses avoid DM burnout. And I think that's only one half of staying excited to be a DM. So, speaking of spectrums, on one end, there's kind of DM burnout where, you're doing too much.
Yep.
You've loaded yourself too much and you can't handle the weight. And then on the other hand, you're bored, right? You feel like things are going too slow. And I think back to what you said about being self-aware, you really need to understand which side of the spectrum you're on, both in life and in your DMing career. Because if you're bored, you want to add more metaphorical weight onto your shoulders. Like you want to add better challenges. So you need to look up rules that you don't know really how to run and add that to your campaign. If you're overwhelmed, you need to pull back and simplify and kind of reach that happy middle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that people have very different issues, but I really liked how you talked about writing earlier, because I've thought about that. And in my personal life, I notice a huge difference when I'm regularly like writing my thoughts down, specifically kind of keeping a journal, like a daily journal, because it helps me contextualize what I'm doing. It helps me think about what I want to achieve. It also helps me just like put into words what I'm feeling, and especially when I'm feeling burnout, it's important for me to realize that, instead of just like having it be in the back of my mind that like, oh man, I feel really tired, or oh, I'm not interested in
Yeah.
whatever, right? And I think that's true for DMing too, where it's, if you can make time for just introspection, maybe if you guys do journal personally, journal about you being a DM. That would help you have that introspection that you need to decide which end of the spectrum you're on, like you were talking about, whether you're doing too much and you need some help from other players, or you need to just cut way back, or do a pre-written adventure instead of self-written.
Yeah.
Then you'll know that. But if it's the other issue where you're just not doing enough, or the game, is just not meeting its full potential because you're not doing a few simple things, then kind of writing and doing that introspection will help you avoid that as well.
Yeah. I really like that. One thing I realized as you were speaking, I think we need to do 2 more episodes on this kind of topic. One on like things specifically to do with burnout,
Yeah.
and then one on things to do with boredom. And I think, we could come up with some pretty good tools or resources. But I really like that suggestion to journal. And obviously, everyone journals differently, so keep that in mind. But I think it's fascinating that this question of how to stay excited about being a dungeon master, a lot of it is about self-regulation, self-understanding, and to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the term self-care, but it is about caring for yourself. If you had a friend who was just super stressed out, wasn't getting enough sleep, you'd tell them to go take a nap, right? There's nothing wrong with taking a nap right before your dungeon master game, your session. But often we look at taking a nap as childish, but it could be a powerful thing. But that's just an example. But I think it's fascinating that with this topic, a lot of it is outside of Dungeons and Dragons, how you're running your life.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's something I'm really glad you mentioned at the end, because like if you're feeling burned out in other parts of your life, DMing can certainly help. If you're on, not burned out, but like boredom or something like that, DM can help because you're spending time with friends. Like I think regardless of where you're at, whether it's boredom or burnout, spending time with people that you care about and having a good time, that's going to help regardless. But as a dungeon master, you just really need to realize that it does require a good amount out of you. And so if you're feeling burned out in every other part of your life, then I don't know if, being a super active dungeon master is for you right now, unless you can like do some of that introspection elsewhere and find out how to, find some balance,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to that point, if you are reaching a breaking point, it might be time to kind of shed the mantle of Dungeon Master for a time and just be a player. Go find
Yeah.
a game where you can play have fun, and just enjoy the game again. And then you can come back and be a dungeon master and kind of take on all that stress and so forth.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you do that, just as a, because I know a lot of people who were dungeon masters for a while, and then, they switch to being a player, and they kind of have a hard time switching back to being a dungeon master. What I'd really recommend is, if you do that, and you definitely should, if you're feeling burned out, then, a way to stay excited about or get that kind of excitement up about being a DM is, after you've taken a second and you've been a player for a bit, is start studying a new campaign or a new one-shot or just small adventure or something, study something that someone else made, get ideas, just because you have a lot more time since you're not actively DMing. And it kind of can give you the luxurious approach to preparing, which is like, hey, you're preparing out of excitement versus need because you got a session coming up. And then when you do plan to be a DM again, you'll have, some sessions ready, just from your previous prep, and you'll be excited about them because you've had this break.
Yeah, I like that so much. So all in all, summary today, if you are having trouble being excited about being a DM, you can either be burned out or bored or kind of a mix of the two. And we're going to come out with 2 more episodes, one on each. But our top recommendations is care for yourself, think about your life as a whole and how being a dungeon master impacts it and vice versa, and look at it holistically. Be self-aware and be self-compassionate, and listen to our future episodes to learn how to be less bored and less burnt out. Any other things you'd like to add, Tanner?
Beyond the fact that I think you're all amazing and I hope that you're taking care of yourselves, no, it's been great talking with you, Justin.
Excellent. Well, likewise, Tanner, and we will see you all next week for another amazing episode. But until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative. Thank you for listening to today's show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. We have a few more announcements to go over. First,
did you ever fall in love with the library as a kid? It was a place where you could experience 1,000 stories without having to buy 1,000 books. That is what Monsters.rent can do for your D&D campaign. You can rent and swap out as many quality miniature monsters and creatures for your D&D party as you could ever want, without having to buy them. You can rescue villagers from a kobold camp, or lead your party through the fighting forest, or many more adventures. We're coming out with new bundles all the time. Just sign up for our subscription to get access to your own personal library of minis. Go to monsters.rent to find out more. That's the website. monsters.rent. Get your library pass to a world of minis today.
we also wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Stardust and Dragons. I'm going to let one of the cast of Stardust and Dragons, Christian Hatcher, and his crew tell you a little bit more about it.
This August, a new adventure podcast is coming to a platform near you, filled with action.
You one of the 2 of them. We can't keep taking hits like that.
Drama.
Everything that she's been doing, everything she's going to do, finally sets in.
And Stardust.
Help! Help! Someone, please!
Find out more about this epic odyssey at stardustanddragons.com, where adventure awaits in the stars.
That's all the announcements we have today. Again, thank you so much for everything you do for us. You make this show possible. Like we said before, we'll be back next week with another great episode, and until then, let's go ahead and roll initiative.